It started with a scream, not the kind that echoed through a crowded street or bounced off alley walls. This one was swallowed whole by the jungle, dense, wet, still. The kind of stillness that makes you second guess if the sound even existed. In June 2021, two Vietnamese backpackers stumbled out of the southern edge of the Truong San forest near the Lao border, barefoot and shaking. Their faces were pale, lips cracked, and one of them, Nguyen Tien Minh, a third-year student at Da Nang University, kept repeating the same phrase. Don't go past the third marker. Don't go past the third marker. No one knew what it meant. Not at first. But that one phrase would unravel a century-old mystery hidden inside a map drawn in faded French ink, sealed in wax, and locked away for decades in the archives of the École Française d'Extrême Orient. And behind it, something no one was supposed to see. Nguyen Tien Minh was no stranger to exploration. At 22, he'd hiked most of the Central Highlands, documenting rare birds for a personal blog followed by nearly 10 zero nature lovers. Minh wasn't reckless. His close friend, Le Bao Khan, described him as obsessive about preparation, often planning trips down to the last minute and meter. Their plan was simple, a 5-day trek into the outer belt of Truong Son forest, starting near Kon Tum and moving west toward the Lao border. It was a dense, less traveled route, but still within what locals consider safe, at least by jungle standards. They weren't alone either. With them was Jean-Luc Morel, a 68-year-old French-Vietnamese geographer who had spent the last decade researching unexplored trails from the colonial period. Jean-Luc wasn't hiking for pleasure. He was chasing something. A map. One he claimed to have uncovered in the basement of his grandfather's countryside home in Sarlat-le-Canada, France. His grandfather, Colonel Henri Morel, had served with the French colonial administration in Indochina during the 1930s. Among his belongings was a large, leather-bound journal tucked inside, a hand-drawn map marked with coordinates, and a chilling phrase in spidery script. Zone Interdite, à ne jamais franchir, 1931. Restricted zone, never to be crossed. At first glance, it looked like an ordinary military sketch. But Jean-Luc noticed oddities. The zone was drawn without topographic features. No rivers, no elevation, just a circle. A perfect one stamped in the middle of a jagged, mountainous region. What made it stranger was that the French administration never documented a restricted zone there. There were no military installations, no mining operations, and no native resistance movements reported in that exact area. It was blank. Minh and Jean-Luc met at a climate seminar in Da Nang in late 2020. They bonded over their shared love of cartography, and by the end of the month, Minh agreed to guide Jean-Luc through parts of the Truong San range for his research. They planned for a 5-day trip, but on the 7th day, only Minh and Khan returned. Jean-Luc was gone. There was no blood, no signs of a struggle, only an old canvas backpack, half buried under leaves, and a shattered composites needle stuck spinning in place. At first, police dismissed it as an accident. The jungle had claimed plenty of lives over the years, but Minh's behavior told a different story. He refused to sleep with the lights off. He insisted on keeping all the windows shut. He stopped eating. And then, there were the drawings. Dozens of them, charcoal on yellowing paper. Each one showed a crude outline of tree stand in the middle, a dark circle. Always the same size. Always the same shape. When asked, Minh would simply say, "That's where we heard it." Heard what? His mother once asked, but he never answered. Back in France, Jean-Luc's disappearance made small waves in local newspapers. A retired academic lost in a remote part of Vietnam unfortunate, but not headline news. Until a reporter named Camille Dupré stumbled upon something strange while researching Jean-Luc's academic work. She found a letter, dated 1983, addressed to the Service de Documentation Extérieure et de Contre-Espionnage, France's foreign intelligence service at the time. In it, Jean-Luc's grandfather, Henri Morel, wrote about a location of unnatural interference discovered during a 1,931 expedition into the Central Highlands of Annam. He described an uncharted clearing where compasses failed, radios went silent, and members of his scouting party reported hallucinations. One man, Sergeant Andre Lemoyne, walked into the circle and never came out. They waited 3 days, then left. The map, Henry wrote, was drawn not to mark where to go, but where never to return. And yet, Jean-Luc had returned to that exact spot, nearly a century later. Men eventually agreed to a series of interviews with a small podcast based out of Ho Chi Minh City. In one recording, dated October 12, 2021, he said something that still baffles investigators to this day. "I don't think Jean-Luc died. I think he walked into the circle, and he stopped being here. That's all." When asked what he meant, Min hesitated, then added, "You don't understand. The forest wasn't quiet. It was listening." But that was only the beginning, because 2 months later, a group of rangers clearing a trail 30 kilometers north of the original site stumbled upon something even stranger. Half buried under the roots of a centuries-old tree was a second map. And this one wasn't in French. It was written in a language no one could immediately identify. A circular symbol at its center, and at the very bottom, scribbled in what appeared to be faded English. "Return what you took." For weeks, no one could identify the second map's language. Linguists from the University of Hugh examined it under infrared scans and spectral analysis, hoping to find a clue beneath the faded surface. But the script defied categorization. It wasn't Khmer. It wasn't Lao. It wasn't even ancient Cham. One researcher, Dr. Phan Quoc Bao, suggested something radical, that the script didn't originate from the region at all, that it might be constructed, intentionally designed to look old, obscure, unreadable, but the symbol in the center, that same perfect circle, matched Jean-Luc's French map exactly, down to the millimeter. Even stranger, beneath layers of dirt and mold on the paper's corner, there was a faint seal burned into the parchment, a triangle. Inside it, a pair of wings and the letters S-I-C. No agency, university, or historical archive could identify those initials. But someone else did. 3 days after the discovery, Camille Dupré received an encrypted email through the Proton Mail account she had used to correspond with Min. There was no subject, no signature, just a message. The SIC was real. They called it the Société d'Isolation Cartographique, the Cartographic Isolation Society. They mapped areas that weren't meant to be known, and then erased them. Attached was a photograph, grainy, black and white. It showed 4 men in expedition gear standing beside a large stone arch swallowed by vines. The jungle around them was too dense for the Central Highlands, but the man on the far left was unmistakable. It was Jean-Luc's grandfather, Henri Morel. Camille tried to trace the email's origin. No luck. IP address bounced through 6 countries before disappearing altogether. Whatever this SIC was, someone didn't want it found. Meanwhile, Min was spiraling. He stopped returning calls, skipped his university finals. His blog went silent. Until one night, in early December, he posted a single, cryptic video. It was only 32 seconds long. Shot with a shaky phone camera, the footage showed him standing deep in the jungle. Leaves rustled softly. Cicadas hummed in the distance. But the strange thing was the light, it looked like twilight, even though the timestamp read 2:41 p.m. Min turned the camera toward himself. "There's something beneath the soil here," he whispered. "It hums. I don't know how else to explain it. When you stand still long enough, you hear it just under your feet, like the forest is alive. Not metaphorically. I mean it." He paused, then smiled almost peacefully. "If I don't come back, I'm not lost. I'm just not here anymore." The video ended with a brief glimpse of something behind him, blurred, hard to distinguish. Could have been a tree, could have been a structure, could have been nothing. But in the last frame, just before it cut to black, a low sound played. Not wind, not an animal. It was mechanical, almost rhythmic, like breathing. 3 weeks later, Min's body was found 11 kilometers from where the second map had been discovered. Except it wasn't a body. Not really. It was just clothes. His boots, pants, and shirt laid out neatly beside a dry riverbed. His watch still ticking. Phone missing. No blood, no animal tracks. Just one word, carved into the bark of a nearby tree. Remember, authorities didn't release the photo to the public, but Camille got her hands on it. And what chilled her most wasn't the word. It was the tree itself. Because carved into its bark under decades of weather and growth were other words. French, dated, faded, ne pas entrer. Le sol n'est pas réel. Do not enter. The ground is not real. In February 2022, Camille made her first trip to Vietnam. She met with Khan, the only living person who had gone beyond the third marker and come back. But Khan had changed. He lived alone in a small house on the outskirts of Pleiku, near the edge of the forest. No phone, no internet. When Camille arrived, he opened the door slowly, as if expecting someone else. He didn't remember much. Not of the exact moment Jean-Luc disappeared. Not what Min heard, not how they found the map, but he remembered the circle. I don't think it's a place, he said slowly. It's a choice, like something waits, not for us to find it, for us to step in. Camille asked him what would happen if someone stepped into it. Khan didn't blink. They forget you, even the earth forgets you. A week later, Camille sent a package from Hanoi to her editor in Paris. Inside was a notebook, 3 SD cards, and a single-page letter. The letter ended with a question. What if this isn't a warning, but a seal? And what if breaking it wasn't about trespassing but awakening? That was the last anyone heard from her. Camille Dupré never boarded her return flight. She vanished somewhere near Alloué District Right, where the map's coordinates pointed. And the circle? It was waiting. At 3:12 a.m. on March 9th, a motion-triggered camera deep within the jungle, belonging to a group of American conservationists tracking endangered gibbons, recorded a series of strange events. The footage, retrieved days later, began like any other. Leaves stirred in the wind. An owl perched silently on a low branch. A bat passed once, then again. And then the light shifted. Not flickered shifted, as if the very temperature of the colors had changed. The greens became grayer. Shadows lengthened without a light source. In the middle of the screen, a shape appeared blurry. Humanoid, but not quite there. The figure didn't move like a person. It swayed like seaweed underwater, smooth, slow, dreamlike. And just before the feed glitched and went black, a face emerged briefly in the static. It wasn't Min. It wasn't Camille. It looked like it was made of bark and moss and bone. No eyes, just indentations, like something had tried to remember what a human looked like and got it wrong. The forest had started watching back. 6 days later, Camille's SD cards arrived in Paris. Her editor, Julien Renaud, uploaded the contents onto his desktop and immediately noticed something odd. There were 3 folders, all time-stamped, each containing dozens of short video clips. But they didn't follow a linear story. Some showed dense, empty forest, others were close-ups of tree bark, but the grooves seemed to form letters or even faces if you stared too long. One clip just 17 seconds long showed Camille in what appeared to be a cave. Her voice was low, calm, but trembling. There's something under the soil, she said. It's not earth, it's memory. This place remembers people, and sometimes it keeps them. Another video had no image, only sound. A whisper on repeat. Not lost, not gone, still beneath. The final folder was locked, encrypted, named simply Écoute. Listen, Julien hired a cybersecurity firm to crack the file. It took 11 days. What they found was disturbing. The file contained a single audio track, 7 minutes, 22 seconds. At first, it was just jungle ambience, insects, wind, the occasional call of a distant bird. But slowly, the sounds became layered, wrong. Voices began to bleed through, echoes as if recorded in a vast chamber. Some cried out in French, others in Vietnamese. One kept repeating the same phrase, again and again in a thick accent. You are standing on them. They're beneath. Still awake. At the 4-minute mark, something new entered the track. A heartbeat. But not Camille's. Not human. It was slow, wet, pulsing. Then came the breathing raspy, circular, as if the lungs were not made for air. Then silence. Absolute, suffocating silence, until a final whisper came through, almost apologetic. We never should have drawn the map. Julien brought the tape to a sound specialist at the Institut National de l'Audiovisuel. The technician ran it through multiple spectrogram filters, and that's when they saw it. The waveform of the audio wind visualized wasn't random. It formed a shape, a perfect circle, with 3 dots inside it, equidistant, like markers. And if you overlaid the waveform directly onto the old French map Camille had uncovered, the dots matched the circle exactly. One of them marked the spot Camille had vanished. The second, the clearing where Min had filmed his final message. The third, a plateau near the Laos border, completely uninhabited. No roads, no villages, nothing. Until a satellite scan revealed something terrifying. Right in the center of the plateau was a perfectly round depression in the ground. A crater, but not from impact. There were stairs, carved into the earth, leading down. A joint expedition was launched weeks later, consisting of Vietnamese military scouts, a French cultural attaché, and 3 scientists from the University of Bordeaux. They reached the site on May 20. What they found was not ruins. There were no temples, no stones, no carvings, only the crater, circular, 82 meters across. At its center, an opening, man-made, a spiral staircase disappearing into darkness. The team descended 47 meters before they stopped, because the walls began to whisper. They didn't say it, they heard it. Each person heard something different. A voice they knew, a word from a childhood dream. One soldier collapsed to his knees, sobbing, saying he'd heard his mother calling him home, except she died 15 years ago. The attaché, a man named Louis Carreau, refused to go any further. He left the jungle the next morning and resigned from his post within the week. The rest of the team, they kept descending. And then, contact was lost. Radio signal cut out at 62 meters. No distress call, no alarm, just static. And then, silence. A month later, a rescue team found the crater again. The staircase was intact, but there was no trace of the team, only their equipment, neatly folded at the base of the stairs, and scratched into the stone floor again that word, remember, but it didn't look freshly carved. It looked ancient. When the second team returned with the footage and the findings, something strange began to happen. One by one, each member of the recovery crew reported the same experience, persistent nightmares. Not just dreams nightmares. Detailed, vivid, and recurring. In every dream, they descended the staircase again, but this time it kept going past 62 meters, down into a place where the air grew thick and red, where there were no walls, only faces. Stone faces. Staring. Silent. Some described hearing a melody faint and slow, like a funeral hymn underwater. Others heard a voice, always the same voice, and it only said one thing. You were warned. One of the men, a veteran named Vin, slit his wrists in his hotel room a week later. He didn't leave a note. Only one word carved into the bathroom mirror with a broken shard of glass: Echo. The Vietnamese authorities closed the site indefinitely, but it was already too late. Something had been found, or perhaps something had found them. Back in Paris, Julien Renaud had been obsessively reviewing Camille's original footage, and one evening, he noticed something he'd missed before. In one of the earlier videos shot during her third day in the forest, Camille stands in a clearing, pointing to something just off screen. She's speaking in French, but her voice is trembling. You see that tree? It's not the shape, it's the bark. Look closely. Julien zoomed in. The bark was unlike anything he'd ever seen. It didn't peel, it didn't crack. It splied as if open from within. And deep inside, between the folds, something glimmered. Not sap, not moisture. It looked like an eye. He froze the frame and sent it to a botanist friend at the Muséum National d'Histoire Naturelle. The reply came within minutes. This isn't any known species. The structure's all wrong. It's not a tree. It's not even plant tissue. This looks like chitin, insect shell. But what kind of insect lives in the shape of a 12-meter tree? And why was it watching her? Then came the final breakthrough. Julien, unable to sleep, began researching French military archives from the Indochina era. A name kept popping up in scattered reports and private letters: Project Chrysolite. There were no official documents, no public references, only cryptic mentions in personal correspondences of officers stationed near the Laos border. One letter dated July 1953 from a Colonel Henri Duval read, "We must never return to that place. The map was a mistake. The monks warned us. Their silence is the only barrier left." Another, unsigned, said simply, "It's not a temple. It's a shell." Julien dug deeper, eventually uncovering a microfiche stored in an off-site archive in Lyon. It contained a heavily redacted mission briefing. What little was visible described a covert operation involving a team of engineers and anthropologists sent into the jungle to investigate anomalous terrain behavior. One line stood out: Subject Alpha dormant beneath strata layer 7. Recommend permanent containment. No excavation permitted. Active awareness suspected. Subject, dormant, awareness. This wasn't just a geological site. It was alive. A week later, Julien vanished. His apartment door was found unlocked. Laptop still open. Coffee still warm. But no signs of struggle. No signs of travel. On his monitor was a single word typed into a blank document: "It's awake." No trace of him was ever found. The only thing the police recovered was Camille's original SD card, which Julien had placed inside a sealed envelope labeled, "To be opened only if I disappear." The envelope was handed over to Camille's brother Luc Moreau, a high school history teacher from Marseille. He had no idea what his sister had really been doing, no clue what she had uncovered. He almost didn't open it, but curiosity or fate got the better of him. Inside the envelope was not just the SD card. There was also a photograph. Old, faded, taken in black and white. It showed a group of French soldiers, 6 of them standing in front of a giant stone doorway, half buried in earth. But what truly unsettled Luc was the 7th figure, standing behind them, almost hidden by shadow. A tall shape, too tall, with no face, and long, narrow fingers curling around the edge of the stone. Someone had written on the back of the photo in red ink. They fed it names. Weeks later, Luc flew to Vietnam. He told no one. But just before his flight, he mailed a small package to a friend-in investigative journalist named Alice Lamb. Inside the package was a USB drive, a note, and a plane ticket from Paris to Da Nang. The note read, "If I don't return in 14 days, go to these coordinates. Bring no one. Don't follow the stairs." Alice waited. 14 days passed. Luke didn't return, so she packed light, turned off her phone, and boarded the next flight. Alice Lamb didn't consider herself brave, but she was curious. And more than that, she had questions no one seemed willing to answer. The coordinates Luke left her pointed to a stretch of jungle just north of Alui, near the Lao border. A dead zone. No cell signal, no marked trails, no reason for anyone to be there. Except someone had been there. There were faint tire tracks, long faded, scratches on bark, not from animals. A bent, rusted sign, half buried in vines, with the words barely visible under decades of grime. Zone militaire. Interdiction totale. Alice knew some French. Military zone. Total prohibition. But the jungle didn't care. It swallowed everything signs, paths, people. She hiked for hours. Then for days. Until the jungle changed. The birds stopped singing. The cicadas fell silent, and the trees began to curve out with the wind, but inward, toward a point like they were leaning to listen. On the third night, she found a stairwell. Just like in Camille's footage, concrete steps spiraling down into the earth, damp, mossy, and utterly black. She hesitated, then descended. 15 steps, 20, 40. Then, her flashlight flickered, and she heard it. A voice, so soft it wasn't sound, but vibration. A whisper inside her own bones. "You're not the first." She turned back, but the steps behind her were gone. Not invisible gone. As if the staircase had rearranged itself. She was trapped, but that wasn't the twist. The real twist came when she finally reached the bottom, because waiting there was Luke, or something wearing him. He looked the same, but too still, too clean. No insect bites, no dirt, no wear. He blinked slowly, spoke calmly. "You came, just like I hoped." Alice stepped back. Her heart thundered. "Luke, what happened to you?" He tilted his head. "It's not about what happened to me. It's about what I remembered." He reached into his coat and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. He unfolded it gently. A map. Old. Yellowed. But unmistakable. It was a near-perfect match to the colonial French map found decades ago. But this one was older. Far older. Not printed, drawn by hand. And the text wasn't in French. It wasn't in any known language. Alice stared, and something began to shift in her mind, as if the letters were changing, becoming readable but at the cost of something else. She felt her name slip from memory, then her birthday, then the name of her mother. Luke smiled. "Now you see." Back in Paris, a team of linguists working with the recovered footage from Camille's expedition had just made a breakthrough. The symbols on the temple walls weren't an ancient dialect. They were a mnemonic script designed not to be read, but to be absorbed. Each symbol was a command, a memory trigger, a key. Put in the right sequence, they didn't tell a story. They rewrote one. That's why Camille had gone quiet before her death. That's why the recovery crew dreamed the same dream. The temple wasn't a monument. It was a device. One designed not to contain something, but to invite it in. In Vietnam, Alice sat frozen on the cold stone floor. Luke knelt beside her, holding her hand like an old friend. His voice was kind. They used to feed it names. Names of the unwanted, rebels, enemies. He looked down at the map again, but now it's hungry. Not for names, for memories, for stories. He paused, then smiled faintly. For witnesses. Alice trembled. "Why me?" Luke leaned close, his voice like silk now. "Because you're the last one asking questions." He placed the map in her lap, and the stairwell behind her opened again. Alice never remembered walking out. But somehow, days later, she woke up in a hospital in Hue. No ID, no phone. She didn't remember who she was. Only a name whispered in sleep. Camille. Doctors said it was amnesia. The French embassy arranged her return. They filed it under jungle trauma. Case closed. But Alice wasn't Alice anymore. She began drawing. Not with intention, but compulsively. Pages and pages of curved lines, geometric shapes, stairwells, and eyes. And always in the margins, the same word over and over. Chrysalide. She didn't know what it meant, but something inside her did. They called it a miracle. A foreign journalist found alive after disappearing for nearly 3 weeks in one of Vietnam's most remote jungles. No bruises, no fractures, no broken bones, but she didn't speak. Not at first. Alice sat in the corner of her hospital room in Hue for days, silent, watching the light move across the walls, drawing spirals on napkins, tracing invisible symbols on the bed sheets. Doctors chalked it up to trauma. Her file labeled her with dissociative amnesia. But it wasn't just memory loss, because when she finally did speak, her first words were in a language no one could identify. Not Vietnamese, not French, not even Khmer. A linguist from the University of Da Nang was brought in. He called it constructed gibberish. Except, on the third day, Alice drew a map. The same map Luke had given her. And right there, plain as daylight, was a symbol the linguist recognized. It matched a carving inside a long-abandoned French bunker near the Laos border. A carving thought to be graffiti from bored colonial troops. But now, it seemed older. Much older. Back in France, a quiet panic was brewing. 3 months after Alice's return, the family of Camille Renaud received an unmarked envelope. Inside, a thumb drive. On it, footage no one had ever seen before. The last hour of Camille's expedition. Unedited. In it, Camille speaks to the camera, not reporting, but almost warning. If you find this, tell them not to dig. The carvings aren't art. They're coordinates, they're keys. And we opened something we didn't know. We thought it was history, but it was alive. The footage ends with a low rising tone. Then Camille turns to the camera one last time and smiles, but her eyes are not hers. The footage was leaked anonymously to a journalist in Belgium. From there, it spread like wildfire across forums, conspiracy threads, Reddit. They dubbed it the Chrysalide File. Some called it fake, a viral ARG. Others weren't so sure, because strange things started happening. One man claimed to have watched the footage and forgot his own wedding anniversary, something he said had never happened in 20 years. Another said he dreamed of stairwells, of doors opening in the ground, of soft, wet whispers saying, "Come home." A woman in Hanoi uploaded a video of her 5-year-old repeating the phrase chrysalide over and over in her sleep despite no one in the house ever having said the word. And then came the suicides. 3 viewers, unconnected, different countries, no history of mental illness, died within a week of watching the raw footage. Each left a note behind. Each note had just one phrase: "The staircase has no top." Alice was moved to a private care facility in Brittany, paid for, curiously, by a fund linked to a dissolved French military unit from the Indochina era. She no longer responded to her name. She now answered to Camille. And sometimes, when alone, she would press her hand to the window and whisper phrases only heard once before, in a jungle stairwell beneath layers of forgotten stone, under symbols meant to never be spoken aloud. Local rumors in Alua say that 2 Vietnamese park rangers went missing last month while surveying near the same area Alice had entered. All that was found was a radio, still on, broadcasting a loop of soft, slow whispers. When translated, the words made no sense. But linguists noted one repeating term once again: chrysalide. Some say it's the name of the thing waiting inside the jungle. Others say it's the process what happens to those who enter. like a cocoon, like metamorphosis. One final note. 6 months ago, a forestry officer named Vin discovered a strange patch of trees deep in the jungle. All the trunks bent at a perfect angle curved inward, as if reaching towards something at the center. At the heart of that grove, buried in mud, he found an old metal box. Inside, a notebook covered in dirt and vines. On the last page, in shaky handwriting, I am not Camille. I am not Luke. I am not Alice. We are becoming. Maybe the jungle didn't take Alice. Maybe it returned something else in her place. Today, the area marked on that ancient map is once again sealed off officially for ecological preservation. No tourists, no researchers, no drones, just a black steel gate with no insignia, and a single line on a sign beside it. Authorized personnel only, Ministère des Armées. No one talks about what really happened out there anymore. Not the French government, not the Vietnamese authorities, not even Alice's family. And yet, sometimes people say they see her, not in Brittany, not in any hospital, but in the jungle, in Alui, standing barefoot among the trees, staring at the sky, unmoving, mouth open as if to sing, except there's no sound. Just the wind rushing through the forest soft, rhythmical most like it's breathing. And then, just like that, she disappears. There's something deeply unsettling about this story. Not just because of what might have been found, but because of how it was all so easily forgotten. Wiped clean. No headlines. No public outrage. Just silence. A silence that feels almost intentional. So let me ask you this. What do you think was really hidden inside that no-go zone? Was it a relic of war? A biological experiment? Or something far, far older? Something that predates even the colonial maps? And most of all, what exactly came back wearing Alice's face? Let us know what you believe in the comments. And if you've ever seen something strange in the forest, something that made no sense, that didn't feel natural, we'd like to hear your story. Because sometimes, the scariest part isn't that the map leads you somewhere forbidden. It's that someone, at some point, decided to draw it in the first place. And then they tried to erase it. This was Twisted Truth. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that you were never meant to hear. Until next time, sleep well, if you can.